my name is Caffrey and welcome back to my YouTube channel, the channel that I like to call the Cozy Corner on YouTube, where we like to discuss everything about film photography, film, cinema, so on and so forth. I'm currently in the provincial Philippines right now with this makeshift setup, so if you hear karaoke in the background or some random classic rock music and my squeaky chair that I'm currently sitting on, then we just have to embrace it. Okay, I apologize, but we're gonna make it work. I hope you guys are well. It feels good to be back in this cozy corner, and today we have a very exciting video because we have a new camera review. Today we are very fortunate enough to be reviewing the Canon A1. I often find myself scrolling through Facebook Marketplace every now and then, just because I genuinely believe that's the best place you can find a bargain for anything, whether it be a coffee table, a couch, and for this specific example, film cameras. And after scrolling for about 10 to 15 minutes or so, I saw a listing for a Canon A1 and a Minolta film camera, and it said £60. That definitely intrigued me, so I shot him a message and I was like, okay, so is it £60 each? And he was like, no, it's £60 for both film cameras. As soon as I heard that, I got really excited, but I took a step back and I was like, I don't need a new Canon and a Minolta. I have my Minolta Union mat. I just really want that Canon A1. So I asked him, can I get the Canon A1 for £30 for half the price? And right away he was like, yeah, go ahead. Just to be safe, I asked him to send me photos and it looked in pristine condition. And not only that, but it came with another lens and multiple accessories. So long story short, I got an absolute bargain on this camera. The camera alone will go for over £100 online, and I managed to get it for £30, including multiple accessories. So if you guys are looking for a film camera, I always say ask your older relatives first. Maybe they have an old one laying around. If not, definitely check out Facebook Marketplace, because that's the place to go for a bargain. So let's get into it. The Canon A1 was released in 1978. This was after the Canon AE1 and before the Canon AE1 program. And these three cameras are usually compared against one another, mainly because they were released around similar times and are very similar in functions, but I'll get into the differences of them later on. The Canon A1 was a very notable camera for its time due to its programmed automatic exposure settings. Now, what does this mean? It's basically saying that the shutter speed as well as aperture for this camera, they're both automated. It was a pioneer in offering full PASM, or what I like to call PASM, for exposure settings. So what is PASM? I think, can I just say PASM? I think I'm just gonna say PASM, like Prindle from The Sweet Life.
Are you familiar with the gear shift?
You mean the Prindle?
It stands for program mode, aperture priority mode, shutter speed priority mode, and manual mode. PASM, PASM.
The Prindle.
Like I said, why I love shooting these videos and having this channel is just because I learned so much about the history of these cameras, and every time I review a camera, I have to say I can't help but respect the people who built this and the way their minds worked and how they always try to innovate. It's just really admirable. It's incredibly convenient to have all four of those exposure modes in one camera, let alone allowing it to be so easy to switch from one mode to another. And of course, I'm going to show you guys how to do that and have a full tutorial on this camera. But first, let's have a tour of the camera itself. Now, compared to the Canon AE1, the Canon A1 is more robust, having a lot more metal and a lot less plastic. Now, let's start at the back of the camera, which is very simple, hardly anything there. But we have what I like to call a little frame here, where when you shoot film, you can basically rip off the cardboard of the film that you're shooting and pop it in here, so you never really forget what film you have in your camera. Right next to that is the very aesthetically looking Canon A1 Japan logo, and I'm not too sure what this material is. It might be plastic. If you guys can comment down below, that would be truly appreciated. And it's surrounded by two thick metallic borders. But one thing that I have to say is very interesting about the back of this camera is that it has a very cool viewfinder cover here. So if you were to lift up my eyepiece, you can see there is this little knob here, and if you were to essentially pull it down, you will hear a little click, and that is your viewfinder being covered. Now the reason they have this is for when you want to shoot long exposures, you have a very long wait time for your exposure, for example, and covering that viewfinder will prevent any light from coming into the viewfinder and potentially ruining your photo. So a very nice and convenient little accessory or option there for you. On the top right corner here, we have a series of white numbers, which if I'm not mistaken is essentially just the serial number of a camera you bought, and every Canon A1 has a different number. Going to the bottom of the camera, you have a little insert here for your tripod. You see this little button here, you essentially hold that down when you want to rewind your film, and you have two inserts on the left and right side of the bottom panel, and this is basically for an automatic winder accessory. So instead of manually winding your film, this accessory which I actually have right here that came with the camera, you pop it on the bottom, you basically don't have to wind your film anymore. After you take a shot, automatically winds it for you, and when you want to roll your film back up once you're done, automatically does that for you as well. I have to say, I love these little details on the camera here. For example, right here next to that rewind button, it says Canon Japan. Those little details, you really do have to appreciate it. And as for the eyepiece, I got this off of eBay for £7 to £10, something like that, and it says Canon Japan on it as well. So I love it. It's really cool how I basically have everything I need for this camera. All of the original parts, the eyepiece is original, and even came with the original Canon strap. Alright, sweet. So let's move to the front of this camera, which has a lot more going on. Let's start off by the very cool A1 logo on the top left hand side if you're looking at the camera from the front. Right next to it is this very cool little sliding contraption, which I have to say is what I love about this camera, is that they really did think about the convenience of it for the user, and I think that's really underrated when people make cameras, especially with the placement of things. Now this is a perfect example. Now this little sliding contraption basically covers that knob that allows you to change your aperture or shutter speed settings. Your other fingers might get in the way and accidentally move it, whereas if you have this cover covering it, that won't happen. Something so small can go a long way. So many thanks to the people that thought of that. Below the logo and that sliding contraption, you have the hand grip, which is literally just a grip for your hand. It feels more comfortable holding it. I saw online a lot of Canon A1s didn't come with this, so I'm very happy that I do have it. Yeah, you really just have that extra grip there. And as you can see on top of it, there is the rotating lock, whereas if you pull it off, you will find the battery compartment here. Now I'm not going to take the hand grip off and pop the battery out, but basically there's a very tiny battery compartment for this camera, and the battery used is a PX28L, which is a very unique battery. It's very tiny and very thick, but it's definitely not one of those batteries that you'll find in your local newsagent or corner shop. You know, I actually had to order this off of Amazon, and it's quite pricey. I think it was like, what, £9 to £10, but you have to get it because this camera will not function without the battery. I'm pretty sure that's going to be quite hard or near impossible to find that here in the Philippines. So when I do go back to the UK, maybe in like Christmas or so, I'm stocking up on that battery. I need to order a ton just to make sure that I can like easily switch out once this one dies. So that is the left hand side. If you go to the right hand side, this is what I like to call the unnecessary section, because I just genuinely think that they put all of these buttons here for backup, and after watching a ton of reviews online, I've come to the realization that nobody touches these buttons here, but we'll go through it. The top black button tucked away here in that corner is actually an exposure lock. So let's say that I manually set an exposure for a shot and I want that exact same exposure for my next shot. I will basically press that down and it will lock the exposure for me for my next shot. Saying it out loud sounds very convenient, so I take back what I said about being unnecessary, but that button there is very necessary for some photographers. But the button underneath that has a silver outline to it, that's basically an exposure preview that you will find in your viewfinder when looking through it. But the reason I think that's unnecessary is because you can basically just half press your shutter button and the exact same thing will happen, which is much easier. You half press, see your exposure, and just take the shot. So if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong here, it's a little confusing, but with this latch, you basically activate it. Do you activate a latch? You activate the latch and you're able to switch between different exposures on your lens, move your exposure ring around on your lens, and you can take different meter readings through that, for each exposure aperture. And what I also heard is that it also helps with older lenses when using this camera. And at the very front of this camera right now, I have a Canon 35 to 70mm lens. This is the lens that came with the Canon A1 when I bought it, and it is a very cool lens to come with this camera, especially with that mini zoom there. Ideally what I would have loved was a 50 1.2 or 1.4, and I think just actually having like that weight on the camera and the overall feel of it will be so much better. And fortunately, my brother-in-law Darren, who I'm so grateful for, he was actually very kind enough to get me a 50mm Canon lens for my Canon A1 as an early Christmas present. I actually don't have it right now, and I'm very, very grateful. So if you're watching this, Darren, thank you, man. I love you. I plan to be in the UK. It's in the UK right now. It's just waiting for me back there. I plan to go there around Christmas time, which can be very exciting as well because I'll shoot another series of videos whilst I'm in the UK. 50mm lens for the Canon A1 on the way, and I'll be sure to shoot an update video once I do get it. If I were to be holding the camera from behind, on the top left hand side here, you'll basically find the ASA or ISO dial, as well as the dial for any exposure compensation. So right now it's set on 400. I actually don't have any film in here right now, but if I were to be shooting Ultramax, for example, I would set the ASA to 400. There's like this little silver or metal patch sticking out, and you basically have to hold that down with your fingernail or something very small, and that will allow you to move the ASA or ISO dial. And like I mentioned, you have your exposure compensation here. I just keep it normal at 1. But if you want to make some exposure compensations, you see this circular button here that has that balance dial. You basically hold that down and you're able to move the knob around. Right in front of that, there is this switch where if you were to move it, you will see a white dot, and this will basically allow you to see the exposure readings through your viewfinder. If you were to hold that down, you will see that this little red light is going off, and that's basically just to show you that your battery is working, therefore your camera is working, you know. Right in the dead center on the camera, we have the hot shoe, which I have a little plastic Canon hot shoe cover for, which I also got on Amazon. Worth it because it's the original piece. Now let's go to the final section, the left hand side of this camera. If you were to look down, you can see right now it is set on L, which is highlighted in red because L stands for locked. Basically, once your camera is in this mode, if that is a mode, you can't use it at all. It's locked. I think that saves your battery. So yeah, definitely put down L when you're not using your camera. A is basically, I think that stands for automatic. So when you want to use your camera, or essentially turn it on, move it to A. And right beneath the letter L, you will see 2 numbers, the number 2 and the number 10. And these are basically timers or countdowns. If you want to take a family photo, put this camera on a tripod, press the shutter button, it will count down to 10 and your shutter will go off. So it's basically just a timer. I don't know why they put 2 seconds. That's like really, really short. I would have made it like 5 and 10 or something, but it's cool. We got 2 and 10. Right above the film counter, you will find this little elevated section, and this is where the magic happens for the Canon A1. This is all about the PASM or PASM. Cool, so let's go through all of the modes. The first one of the PASM is P, which stands for program, which is essentially fully automatic. And the way you want to do that is move the aperture ring on your lens to the letter A, which stands for automatic. If you can see here, it's set on TV mode right now, which is basically for your shutter speed. And at the top of that shutter speed list is the letter P, which stands for program. With that selected, as well as your aperture on the letter A, your camera is now officially in fully automatic mode. And all you have to do then is point your camera at a subject, focus and shoot. Now let's move on to A, which stands for aperture priority mode. All you have to do here is switch this little knob here from TV to AV. And as you can see, that little window has now this yellow panel on it, which is basically a selection of apertures. And then based on the aperture that you select, the camera will then pick the respective shutter speed. Moving on to shutter speed priority mode, what you would want to do is move the lever back to TV and then select which shutter speed you would want. And after you select your preferred shutter speed, your camera will then choose the matching aperture. Now the last on the list, M, which stands for manual mode, you'll basically want to keep your shutter speed where it is and then move your camera aperture ring to the aperture that you prefer. Therefore, your shutter speed and your aperture are both fully in your hands, having your shooting mode fully manual. That's basically it. Now I can understand how confusing that must be the first time around. I definitely had to watch the videos online quite a few times to fully get a grasp of it, but I think just playing around with the camera, naturally you'll get a gist of it over time. It sounds like a whole lot of gibberish at first and like a long TED talk, but over time you'll realize how convenient it is to move between different exposure modes just by the movement of one knob. Now that is basically the Canon A1 compared to the Canon AE1, which was released around 2 years prior. This Canon A1 was actually advertised to more experienced or professional photographers, whilst the Canon AE1 was advertised to more beginner photographers. AE1 only offers shutter speed priority, while this one also offers aperture priority and lower shutter speeds. But what's very odd is that despite having more specifications, the Canon A1's price is actually lower compared to the Canon AE one, which I guess we shouldn't complain about. That's a good thing. We're getting more for less. And when I tried to find the reason as to why online, it basically says that this may be because the AE one's ubiquity and appealing style gives buyers more awareness of it. It's just basically relevancy, really, which is understandable. But if you were to pick a camera from this line, I would definitely get the Canon A1, and the AE1 program is basically just an upgrade from the AE1. Now, due to this camera being relatively new and me still learning about all of its functions, I have not shot a roll of film on it yet, but as always, I go through the Lomography website or any other website online that has example photos shot on this Canon A1 or this camera. I have some lined up in this video for you to take a look at, so enjoy. So beautiful. Now, right off the bat, looking at these photos, what I really did notice was just how crisp and clear the images are. And honestly, when I look through that viewfinder, I can already tell. Compared to my Minolta Unimax, this camera offers a much clearer image. Again, there's around a decade difference between my Unimax and the A1. There's definitely a higher quality of equipment used here. When I really think about what really got me into film photography, that specific film look and that feeling that it conveys, I know that I can get that look with this Canon A1. That warm tones, I love those warm tones, and I cannot wait to get that. So we'll see how my first roll looks on this camera. Hopefully it functions well. This is also my first SLR. I've only been using rangefinders, so it's a very exciting time. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed learning about the Canon A1 with me. As always, I love learning about film photography and new film cameras with you guys and discussing with you on my Instagram. Make sure you guys follow me at Caffrey Cameron on Instagram. Whenever I post a video, those of you on there will be the first to know. Thank you so much again for joining me today in this cozy corner of YouTube. Make sure you guys please subscribe if you haven't yet. It only takes one click, like and share. I'll see you guys within the next week or two. Make sure you guys drink your water, stay safe, have fun, enjoy life, and bye.